Hey, this is Cult Life with me, your host, Robin Jackson. Jehovah's Witnesses have been in the news here in South Africa lately, last week actually, with regard to their blood policy. And this case happened here, right here in my own backyard in the city of Durban. And it's about how the court has battled to save a child from the parents' doctrine of opposing the blood transfusion. So this life of this 5-year-old Durban boy has been saved after his pediatrician went to the court to approve a life-saving blood transfusion for him in defiance of his parents' religious beliefs, which are, of course, the Jehovah's Witness religious beliefs. An urgent interim order was granted about a month ago to allow the boy, who suffers from sickle cell anemia, to receive the blood transfusion as and when it's necessary. But the child's parents, who are deaf, told the court on last week, Friday, that, and they did it via a sign language interpreter, that they still plan to oppose the application on religious grounds, even if it means losing the child. So Jehovah's Witnesses are, of course, forbidden from receiving blood products or blood transfusions. As was reported in the news or in some of the media here. But we know that some blood products, some blood fractions are actually permitted by the Jehovah's Witnesses. But a little bit about that a little later. So on September the 28th, the advocate Deshendra Naidu, he brought an urgent application for an interim order when the KwaZulu-Natal Health MEC and the Addington Hospital, where the boy was being treated, the pediatrician there, submitted they could not allow the child to deteriorate without a blood transfusion, which is the only option necessary to save his life. In court papers, the pediatrician said that sickle cell disease was highly unpredictable, and without a court order, doctors would not be able to save this boy's life, as his parents were refusing to consent to a blood transfusion. The child's condition is an abnormality of the red blood cells, and these contain, of course, hemoglobin, which transports oxygen around the body. And what happened was the boy's hemoglobin count fell to dangerously low levels last month, and that's when the doctors spoke to his parents through a sign language interpreter. They still refused to consent to a blood transfusion. They advised that even if the minor child dies, there shall be no claim against the hospital. But according to the doctor's notes presented to the court, the parents understood the seriousness of the condition, but they still requested home therapy. And in her affidavit, the pediatrician said the child could not be discharged. So the minor child is at high risk of an acute sickle cell crisis, which will result in, intense and debilitating form of this anemia, which is a lack of oxygen in the blood. And which can be fatal. And the pediatrician said that the boy was at risk of infection, cardiac arrest, and a stroke. Normally if any of these conditions are detected, a blood transfusion will become necessary. So when the court adjourned the matter to December the 5th, this was to allow the parents to file opposing papers while the interim order remains in place. So the order is still there for the hospital to go ahead and administer the blood transfusion if and when it deems it necessary. And this case will then be heard again on December the 5th if the parents want to oppose the court order. The Center for Child Law Director Anne Skelton said that the law was clear that parents could not object to medical treatment on religious grounds. However, the court does allow for objections in favor of alternative medical treatment options if there are any available. But in this case, it appears the court found it was urgent to grant the court order and said that it could be argued at a later stage. Skelton said cases in which parents objected to treatment on religious grounds were not common, but several had come before the South African courts over the years. So many Jehovah's Witnesses do not understand what is acceptable and what is not when it comes to the blood issue. It's been a complicated issue over the years where even the doctors treating Jehovah's Witness patients have to be constantly aware of the implications and the changing doctrine and which fractions are allowed and which are not allowed. Over the years this has changed. And it's created a mess. To the point that the Jehovah's Witnesses themselves are not sure, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And here's the dilemma. And this is what I want to mention today. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses know that if they abandon this appalling doctrine, they will have a mass exodus of members. They are too far gone with this doctrine. They've painted themselves into a corner. And in my opinion, they have the blood of countless individuals on their hands. I will be watching this case closely as the appeal hearing is scheduled for December the 5th. But until then, I'm glad that the court actually ordered the blood transfusion to save this little boy's life. And the hospital also has the right now to administer subsequent transfusions if and when it deems necessary. I have spoken about the blood issue before in previous episode of this podcast. You can find it wherever you're listening in on this platform, on whichever platform you're listening on. So go down and search for that episode about the blood issue and how complicated it is with Jehovah's Witnesses, and how even here in South Africa, where the medical fraternity has grappled with this complicated issue with regard to the blood transfusion. Even here, the universities have, the medical schools have started, lecturing about the issue in the medical faculties here at the universities. So I will be listening and looking out for this case. I will be following this case very closely, and I'll update you in subsequent episode after the appeal case is heard to see what the outcome is with regards to this. But for now, the child has been administered blood transfusions to save its life, and I'm glad for it. Until next week, bye for now.